Podcast 2. In the first podcast we looked at the Kiel Mutiny and how that led to the creation of spontaneous workers' councils that spread throughout northern Germany, particularly in the ports and the industrial cities. Taking this a stage further now, we're going to look at the south of Germany, looking at the map here, just focus in on the area of Bavaria in the south. Now Bavaria, unlike the north of Germany, was a much more rural area. The population were more peasants, but nevertheless they were lower classes. And with once the notion, the idea of forming Soviets began to spread in the north, it didn't take long before it got a foothold in the south, in the villages amongst the peasants, who started to form basically peasants' councils. And they took a very similar action to the Soviets in the north. Effectively, they rejected the authority of the ruling classes. They said, we're not prepared to be told what to do by in this case it would be the landlord, who would again be one of the part of the ruling elite, the imperial class that ruled Germany. Now, we said in the previous podcast that in the early stages the Soviets were not really politicised. They didn't go so far as to say we want to overthrow the system. They were largely self-help organisations in a time of crisis. What's significant about Bavaria is these peasant Soviets did become much more politicised. So this was a much more revolutionary feel. Also remember that Bavaria was on the verge of separatism. Okay, go back 40 odd years, back to 1871, before Germany came into existence. Remember, Bavaria was a separate country. There was no Germany. Okay, there were lots of separate German countries. Bavaria was a kingdom ruled by a king. Now that didn't change when Germany became an empire in 1871. Remember, it was a federal system, so Bavaria was allowed to retain her king. So there always was, throughout the Second Reich, the Kaiserreich, a feeling of we are different. We are a long way from Berlin. And if you look at the map there, you can sort of see the geographical distance. Is fairly self-evident. Now, what basically started to happen then at the end of 1918 is these Soviets formed in Bavaria. Is the mood in Bavaria was increasingly one of, well, we want to actually separate. We want to break away and become a separate country. Now, the USPD, the Independent Socialists, managed to get influence in the Bavarian Soviets. Okay, and so what basically happened is they announced that the Bavarian monarchy, in other words the king, was deposed, and they proclaimed Bavaria to be an independent socialist republic. Now this was a significant change, because this is the first occasion that the Soviets had become genuinely politicised. They had made an announcement that was genuinely about overthrowing the system. The majority SPD in Bavaria were kind of caught napping on that one. They were not sure what to do. They didn't agree with the action of the USPD, but they felt that it was necessary to join in. So reluctantly they did join in. Carr's view on the events. Okay, the new government was not revolutionary. Okay, it confirmed the old officials in power and promised to maintain law and order and call a constituent assembly. But the proclamation of a Bavarian Republic was a revolutionary act. Now, be careful here. The distinction here in this bit, when he talks about the new government, he's talking about the government in Berlin. Okay, and we haven't quite gone on to those events yet, so it's a little bit confusing. Apologies for that. But the government in Berlin, we'll talk about this in the next podcast. Remember, of course, the October reform has been announced. It is Chancellor Max, and there has been, and then the announcement has been made, an intention to reform the constitution. Okay, so the national government of Germany has changed its line that the Kaiser will share power with the people, but the national government was not revolutionary. But what's happening down in the south is a revolutionary act. So down in Bavaria, a genuinely revolutionary act has happened. So that's part of the distinction for the essay you're working on at the moment. When you're asked, was it a German revolution, you need to make subtle distinctions. It depends on what part of Germany you're looking at and what time and so on. Okay, so that's the end of this second podcast. Thank you.